Hey guys, welcome back to our next film review for the 2026 Miami Dolphins draft picks. But first, YouTube has been flagging our videos, even though, as far as I can tell, they would fall under this explanation of fair use. Fair use allows creators to use portions of copyrighted material for purposes like commentary, criticism, education, or news reporting, as long as the use is transformative. That means we're adding new meaning, context, or insight rather than just re uploading the original. In our film reviews, we use short clips to analyze plays and player performance, which falls under commentary and education, key elements of fair use. In our breakdowns, we use portions of the full game strictly for analysis and education. The goal isn't to re show the game, it's to teach, explain concepts, and highlight what players and coaches are doing on each play. We slow things down, add commentary, draw on the screen, and give context you don't get from the broadcast. That's what makes it transformative, and it all falls under the fair use commentary and teaching. You're going to notice an overlay on the film portion of this video. We're testing it out as a way to help avoid those copyright issues. I'd really like your feedback on it. Is it too much, or does it take away from the breakdown at all? We want to protect our work, but never at the expense of the quality of the content. So, with that out of the way, here on Focused on Fins, Anthony is more of our wide receiver expert, but with the Dolphins drafting three wide receivers this year, I wanted to take one of them for our film review series, and I chose Kevin Coleman Jr. So, a little background on him. He started his career at Jackson State along with Travis Hunter under Deion Sanders, ended up playing in four schools in 4 years, and that's not ideal. But in today's NIL world, I think it's going to be more of a common occurrence. In 2022 at Jackson State, he had 32 catches, 475 yards, three touchdowns. Moved to Louisville in 2023, had 26 catches, 362 yards, and two touchdowns. The next year in Mississippi State, 74 catches, which was good enough for second in the SEC, 932 yards, and six touchdowns. And then a little bit of a step back in 2025 at Missouri. He had 66 catches, 732 yards, and just one touchdown. But he was missing starting quarterback Bo Prabula for 3 games. Those 66 receptions were good enough for fifth in the SEC last year. As a return man, he had 57 career punt returns for 459 yards. That comes out to an 8.1 yard average and one touchdown. And he also had four kickoff returns for 88 yards. I think those all came in his sophomore year at Louisville, if I remember correctly. Moving over to the athletic testing, so his RAS relative athletic score was a unimpressive 6.03. He did test very poor for the composite grade, for the composite size grade, coming in at 5'10", 179 pounds. And then his composite speed grade was just okay. He had a 4.49 40-yard dash, but had a disappointing and a somewhat surprising 10-yard split of 1.61. And then his explosion grade, his composite explosion grade was great with a 38.5 vertical jump and a 10-foot 6-inch broad jump. Moving over to some of the draft guide stuff that I go through as I'm doing these reviews. Project Game Day had Coleman as a projected 5th to 6th round pick, pointed out his 3.1% drop rate in 2025, also his contested catch rate, catching 9 of 11 for 81.8% in 2025, and that was also noted in the low red zone draft guide. And also that in 2024, his junior year, he forced 26 missed tackles. Going over to Jack Brentnall's Touchdown 2026 NFL Draft Guide, had Coleman as the number 177 overall prospect in his guide, did not have an individual write-up for him. And then Simon Clancy of the Low Red Zone 2026 Had some interesting notes. 2021, he was the Missouri Prep Player of the Year and the number one prospect from the state. He had 16 career high school punt return touchdowns. And then he was the SWAC Freshman of the Year at Jackson State University. Also noted that his yards per reception have fallen each of his 4 seasons in college and has him as a late round potential, especially as a return man. And he ended up getting drafted in the 5th round, number 177 overall, and that matches all 3 projections. And specifically, Jack Brentnall was spot on with his overall ranking, so that was pretty impressive for that. As we transition into the film review, I want you to check out these clips and start to think about how Coleman can contribute on an NFL field, and specifically where he fits on the 2026 Miami Dolphins roster. We're going to start our Kevin Coleman film review with his punt returns. And I want you to remember, as we go through these film clips, we're not trying to show you his best or his worst. We're trying to give you an entire picture of what he is without showing you the entire season's worth of work. So we've got 4 of them here. The first one is going to be a touchdown return against Arkansas. And then the other set is going to be 3 returns from Kansas, because that was the game where he had the most punt return attempts in a game. So here's that touchdown versus Arkansas. You can see he does a good job making the long snapper miss, splits the gunners, right, and then gets upfield. Not blazing there, but enough speed to pull away, right? Nice job weaving through it. Good job setting up his blocks, and then goes for a touchdown. So obviously, nice return here. But that was also his biggest return of the year. He had 2 returns for 50 against Central Arkansas, but other than that, didn't have a whole lot of yards in any individual game. Against Kansas here, he had 3 returns for 15 yards. And on this one, you can see, never really gets going forward, right? Kind of takes his time, tries to find that lane to go, but never really gets vertical with his return, ends up getting taken down pretty quickly. And then the second one versus Kansas here. And does a better job of getting vertical on this one. But you can see, right, and I've never returned a punt, so, I'm very much from the outside looking in here. But I would like to see him, once he gets vertical here, just commit to it, right? Instead of getting 3 feet forward and then trying to go sideways into more traffic, just get forward, right? Get 3, 4, 5 more yards, and just be more consistent from return to return. And the last one here, this was actually a really good rugby style punt. Takes him all the way to the sideline. Would have liked to see Coleman here step to the inside, but the gunner also has very good leverage on him because of that punt, and would have made it pretty difficult. So instead, Coleman just ends up stepping out of bounds here. Can't blame him too much. Like I said, really really good punt on this one. But as a general statement, I thought I would see more out of Coleman as a punt returner. Would like to see him get vertical a little more quicker than what he did on these punt returns that I was able to find of his. Our next set of reps here is going to be Kevin Coleman avoiding some tackles, kind of showing some of the reason they did have him back there as a punt returner. Here you can see him catching over the middle, escapes an arm tackle, and then able to realize his leverage there with his blocker and get outside, get some extra yards. Right, so we're talking about 15 yards right after the catch there. So definitely has a little wiggle when he gets into open field. Right, we're going to see it again here. Don't necessarily like him going back on that. I think this is a first down play. You can see he kind of catches it, hops back. But part of that gives him the vision to be able to sort it out there. And then he makes a good decision to try to split those two defenders, gets near the first down marker. We can see this backfire a decent amount for wide receivers. So, like I said, don't necessarily like the step back part of it, but at the same time can see where it can be a strength at time for him too, to be able to get his eyes around, get some vision on the defenders, and figure out how to get close to the first down. Another one here, so a bit of a dig route. Got a missed tackle from a safety here, right, or a slip. But then he does a good job avoiding that linebacker that's dropping into that hook zone. Again, finding his blockers and then getting to open field, almost scoring on this one. So again, just a good job reading his blocks and getting to open field. This one here, a little bit of a screen pass, another good job getting his eyes around, reading those blocks, and getting upfield for a first down. And then last one here, this is not going to be a big run after catch one, but you can see us catching the ball in the middle of the field and does a solid job of, getting a few extra yards. We're going to get to some of his times that he goes down on first contact later, but on this one, considering you have, 5, 6 defenders around you, getting those 2, 3 extra yards is important and can be valuable at certain times in a game. Next, we're going to take a look at a few rushing attempts from Kevin Coleman Jr. And you can see that Missouri was trying to find different ways to get the ball in his hands. So here we're going to get jet sweep, gets tackled in the backfield. Again, these aren't all good or bad. His right guard doesn't really get out there and get the kick out, and then Coleman ends up slipping there as he's trying to turn up. Um, just kind of showing different ways they're getting him the ball. This time he is motioning into the backfield, and he's going to take a direct snap. Going to go to his right and fake the toss on the reverse action, but then continues to follow his blocks. And you can see on this one, doing a good job being patient as a runner and reading those blocks, able to find that lane and getting through for a big chunk gain there. Here we're going to get another jet. And another good job of, as he's getting into open field there, reading those 3 receivers that are blocking in front of him and doing a good job of identifying where their leverage is, where that lane is opening up, and getting vertical. You can see the punt return side coming out there a bit. Another jet here. And sets up the blocks nicely there, right? He has that wall developing towards the outside as he's working through here. Steps to the inside to kind of lure them in there, and then gets back here to the outside and gets another nice gain. And then last one here is going to be another direct snap with that jet reverse action. And you can see that this time they're able to hold on to the blocks a little longer. Coleman's able to keep his feet, and he's able to find that cutback lane and get upfield for a few yards. And then as we move on to the more wide receiver specific stuff, first rep we're going to look here. They did not send Kevin Coleman deep very often, or at least did not target him deep very often. But you can see on this one that he does a good job tracking the ball over his shoulder. And if he does find that opportunity to get deep, that he can be a threat as a deep ball guy. Doesn't have huge breakaway speed, not going to be a consistent deep threat, but if you get him matched up against a slower defender, he does show good ability to get to the open field, look over his shoulder, and bring down a catch along the sideline like this. Here we're going to look at Kevin Coleman bringing down some contested catch balls, and I don't think that the film is quite as good as the numbers show in that regard, but he does show some ability to do it, right? You can see this one operating out of the slot and does a good job catching that through contact. Another one here going to be kind of similar. What I want you to notice here, because we're going to look at some drops and incompletions later, but a lot of these contested catches, like this one, he doesn't have eyes on the defender and does a good job of pulling them in. This one a little bit deeper, right? Again, eyes to the quarterback. That defender's coming through his back, and he does a good job with concentration of catching through the contact. Now this one, he didn't get hit at the point of catch, but having that linebacker that is dropping back into that coverage can take away from the concentration of a receiver. I think we're going to see some later that you can see where this is an improvement over some of those, and he does a good job here holding his concentration, catching that on the run. And then last one here. So not a whole lot of jump ball stuff from him, and he's not necessarily, this isn't an end zone fade or anything like that, but he's still elevating a bit here, knowing there's a possibility of him getting hit and doing a good job of bringing that one in. Next, we're going to look at incompletions. And I think as we look through these, if you remember from the top, I said that he had a contested catch rate of catching 9 out of 11 attempts, and I wasn't sure that film backed it up. We're going to see that here, I think, because we're going to see more than 2 contested catches, in my opinion, that he does not bring down. So this one operating out of the slot, a little bit of a hook there, and not a great throw, right? Ball's maybe late, doesn't have great separation there, but would like to see Coleman do a better job of fighting through the catch point, coming back to the ball, and making a better attempt at bringing that one in. This one here, and this is like the one that we talked about earlier that wasn't necessarily a contested catch. On this one, going over the middle there, I think he gets eyes on that linebacker, knows he's about to get hit, and then loses his concentration, ends up dropping the ball and taking the hit anyways. This one here, so this is actually going to be the exact same one, just a different angle here. And you can see as Coleman comes over the middle there that he kind of backs off a little bit there as he gets his eyes on that linebacker, knows he's going to get hit, ends up dropping it as a result. This one here, like I said, not a jump ball receiver, but at the same time, would like to see him be able to play that in the air a little bit better, come back to it a little bit, knowing that defender is sitting on that route, but he just keeps kind of drifting back and lets that defender get in front of him to make the play. Another one here where I think he's going to get spooked a little bit, basically just lets that fall to the ground. And, you kind of get it on one sense that, that can end up being a hospital ball. But at the same time, if you're going to be a screen ball guy, right, you got to be willing to, run into the defense as you're catching that ball and, take the risks associated with it. Because if he does catch this is actually setting up for a really nice play. But that hesitation there where he seems to be more worried about getting hit than bringing the ball in leads to an incompletion. This one is going to be a Hail Mary attempt, and Coleman's going to be at the front of the goal line here, and you can see that in all this traffic, he is trying to basket catch it down near his waist, and he ends up getting defenders coming over top of him. Probably in the NFL, not the guy you want on a Hail Mary attempt, but at the same time, if you're going to be out there, I think this needs to be a guy that's going to go out there and try to high point the ball and bring it down as opposed to letting it come to him like he does there. Got a couple more here. This one, just another one where, right, not a great decision, not a great throw, but at the same time, if you are Kevin Coleman Jr., that defender is there. You've got to do a better job of playing through that catch point. Maybe you're not going to bring this ball down, but you've got to prevent an interception in that scenario. Ball's behind him here. Not even sure if I classify this as a drop, right? But doesn't have a huge catch radius in this sense. Ball's behind him, but I think he still gets both hands on it, and the defender is able to separate him from the ball. So, again, just including this in the incompletions. And then this one here, you know, just a bit of a, whether it's catch radius, lack of concentration, right? This has to be one that you bring in. This is a pretty good ball. He's over top of that linebacker that's trying to get back into coverage. So it's not going to be a contested catch at all. This is one that you have to be able to bring in if you're going to be, a smaller receiver like this. Now, as a receiver that is going to have, a very specific role, you've got to be able or at least willing to be a blocker. And I don't think this is ever going to be a strong suit for Coleman, mainly due to his size. But there are plenty of good opportunities or good reps of him showing good effort with it. Like, he's a scrappy, um, smaller wide receiver, but he's willing to get out there and stick his nose into it. And you do get some good blocks from it. Here you can see him coming from the far side of the field, does a good job setting up and stalking that safety. And he's a big part of the reason that run's able to cut back here and go for a big gain. And then on the negative side of it, a lot of these are going to look the same. This first one, so got a bit of a flea flicker here. Would like to see him at least step up and chip that defensive lineman that's coming through. And I understand that's a big ask, but your secondary responsibility after getting the tossing it to the quarterback, is to protect the quarterback. And Coleman just kind of stands back there and watches the action, even though we've got a late defensive lineman getting through. Would like to see Coleman take on a little bit of that contact as opposed to leaving the quarterback open to possibly take on a big hit there. Didn't end up that way, but don't want to play the results there either. Now, the rest of these are basically going to be the same thing. Like, we have Coleman out here, and he is showing good effort to get out here in good position, but just getting driven backwards. And he does just enough on this one to let the runner get outside, but still getting driven into the backfield. This one ends up bouncing the other way, but you can see that, line of scrimmage is the 27 there, and Coleman's getting knocked back to the 29-yard line. Same idea here, working from the slot again, getting knocked back. Again, right, aggressive, getting out there, making contact at about the 14, but then getting driven back to the 17, 18-yard line, and his defender making the play. Another one here, you can see him just getting discarded pretty easily by this slot defender, right? Little push-pull there. Uh, Smaller receiver not able to deal with the length of that slot receiver. And then last one here, another one where he gets out there and he, yes, the running back gets outside, but if we're, looking at Coleman by himself, right, gets out to the 34-yard line where he's trying to attach to that linebacker, and that linebacker just, basically runs through him like a hot knife on butter and is able to belly that out further. And then we're getting close to the end here, but I also wanted to show you, while he does have a good highlight reel, right, there are too many opportunities where Kevin Coleman Jr. is tackled by the first defender. He does not play through contact very well as a runner. And you can see that on, and some of these are tough, right? That this one here is a tough one. This defender has a good angle on him, but it's essentially a left arm taking him down. And part of this is a size issue. It's always going to be a thing with Kevin Coleman Jr. Here you can see doing a good job getting across, but then, right, defender gets down around his ankles, able to bring him down fairly easily. Now we're getting that jet action. Again, just an arm tackle, right? Swiping the legs. This is the type of tackle that he should be able to play through. Another one here. And once again, right, just first defender taking him down easily. And this is why it's important to not necessarily watch the entire season's worth of film, but watch some full game films, because the highlights are going to show that he does, he is slippery. He can make some stuff happen, but you got to be realistic about what the percentages are when that type of stuff is going to happen with a guy like Kevin Coleman Jr. Right? There's going to be plenty of times where defender like that just gets a left arm around his hip and he's not able to run away from that tackle. Couple more here. Right? Bigger receiver. We're talking about a Chris Bell here. When he catches this, could possibly run through and continue upfield. And then last one here, right? Another good job of finding the open space, but then just gets tackled too quickly for a guy that, is, at least in my eyes, probably competing for a punt return job, stuff like that. Just goes down a little too easily at times, in my opinion. And then the last set of videos we're going to look at here. So this is very much a nitpicking thing, but there were too many times in his film that the quarterback would start to get out of the pocket and he would just basically quit on the play, right? And this first one's a decent example of that, right? As the quarterback is starting to scramble, right? Coleman's defender leaves immediately. I feel like Coleman should be moving into this open space, hands up in the air, just screaming for the ball, right? But he just kind of, slow jogs it, watches the play. Going to have something similar here, right? As the quarterback is breaking the pocket here, right? Coleman, in my eyes, should be working back to the quarterback the way that the other receiver is up here, right? Number 2 sees this. He's working back towards the quarterback. Coleman just kind of continues, you know, non-urgent, continuing deep, allowing himself to be stuck to the defensive back. Would have liked to see him be more involved there. And then this one here, so he's going to do a good job here of finding the open zone, right? But as the quarterback is scrambling, you can see that Coleman just kind of quits on the play a little bit early, in my opinion. Like, he doesn't try to really show that he's available. He doesn't try to get over there to try to block for the quarterback that's running. He just kind of gives up on the play and walks away. And I think this kind of stood out to me more just because of a lot of the other guys that we have looked at that the Dolphins have drafted this year. You don't find this on their tape. So I think it just kind of stood out to me with Coleman a little more. All right, so as we move into the conclusion here, you guys know that I don't do receiver reviews very often. So I went out and asked AI, like, what kind of stuff should I make sure to talk about for you guys? Because I do watch the film, I can make observations, but I might not necessarily pick out the right things that you guys want to hear. So when I asked AI, here's some of the things that they, said that I should talk about. His separation, release versus press, and I would say that's non-existent. He's primarily a slot receiver. You can see they used a lot of different motions and stuff to create releases for him. I'm not sure that I saw him get pressed the entire season, so I don't think that's anything that we can really definitively say one way or the other. I think based on the fact they really didn't ask him to line up on the line of scrimmage, it's probably not going to be a strong suit of his, but I can't sit here and definitively say that he is just awful at that, right? And then route pacing and leverage, I think he does a good job with this. I think he does his routes can be a little more polished, right? The breaks can be a little better, but I think that he does a good job of understanding where that leverage is against the defenders when he is making those breaks. But when we talk about his early, mid, late wins in terms of separation, a lot of that is going to come early. It's going to come by play design. He's not going to separate a lot on his own, and he doesn't have that blazing speed to separate late. Next thing is catch point, right? The hands are pretty good most of the time. There were a couple times that he was, double clutching as he was catching, but overall, I thought that his hands looked pretty solid. The contested catches, we talked about the numbers behind that and then looked at some of that. I think there are opportunities where he shows some strength in that category, but it's not overall, right? I think that 9 out of 11 is a little bit misleading in terms of talking about him as a contested catch receiver. And then a big part of that comes down to his ability to play through contact, especially when he has the eyes on the defender. I think he's a better contested catch guy when his eyes are to the quarterback and he can't see what's coming at him. When he can see the action that's coming in front of him, I think that the performance drops there a good bit. And then yards after catch was something that we looked at. He does show good short area burst, but the tackle breaking just isn't there. His vision in space, I think he does a good job of setting up his blocks and finding those open lanes. At times can do a better job of getting vertical early, but again, the tackle breaking, right, doesn't do a whole lot of that, right? Solid at avoiding tackles, but once a defender gets his hands on him, then more often than not, Coleman is going to be going down. And a lot of that makes sense. Like when we talk about his physical profile, his play speed is good, not great. Like I said, he's not going to run away from a lot of defenders, but he does, show a good ability to find those soft spots in the zone early. He shows a good ability of once he identifies that lane as a ball carrier of turning up and getting vertical. Um, so I think that there's very much a ceiling on what he's going to be in that sense at his stature. And then we talked about the blocking some there, that the effort is there. He's going to get out there. You're going to have to be careful in the way that you use him. You're not going to be able to use him in that slot role where you're running the crack toss and he's blocking down on an edge defender to seal the edge because he's going to get run over in that sense. But I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple of long runs this year where we see Coleman as a guy 15, 20 yards downfield. Um, and part of that can be improved with technique, and part of it is just what it is with his size. And, some of the stuff that we're talking about here in terms of the routes, the blocking techniques, all of that stuff, like with him bouncing around schools, there is still some undeveloped stuff there. And I think that may have been part of the appeal for this pick is that they think there's some uncovered potential that if you can get him to, learn some better techniques in terms of concentration catching the ball, a little bit better technique blocking the ball, then we could possibly see, somebody that produces better than what his draft value would say. And then just talking about what I see his role as in the NFL, I see him competing with probably Malik Washington to be the punt returner. At this point, I would probably still take Malik Washington over him in terms of wide receiver stuff, right? See him more as that Z receiver, the motion, right? Maybe the F receiver, the third receiver, where you're scheming him open more often. You saw him do a little bit of wildcat stuff, a little bit of jet, right? So there are different ways that you can get him involved in the game. He is not strictly a wide receiver the way that, say, a Caleb Douglas would be. You can find some creative ways to get Kevin Coleman the ball if he earns that. Um, don't think that he's ever going to be, a deep ball guy that is just a consistent deep ball threat. I don't think that he's going to be a high volume possession guy. I think we're talking, more of a limited snap gadget guy, right? Almost needs to catch on as that punt returner to to earn a roster spot, right? I think that we're going to see, guys like Kevin Coleman Jr., Malik Washington, Taj Washington, Tutu Atwell. They're all going to be competing for the same type of snaps on the offensive side of the ball. So that's going to wrap up this video. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. It was fun for me to get out of my comfort zone a little bit, do some wide receiver stuff. Like I said at the top, let me know what you think of the border that we put on that to, try to get past the YouTube copyright so we can earn, a few bucks for the work that we do with these videos. It's nothing. It's not enough to quit a day job or anything like that, but it is nice to get a little bit on the back end there. But as always, appreciate you guys watching. Leave some comments below. Let me know what you're thinking. Make sure to join Anthony and I on Wednesdays around 4:15 Eastern, and we will see you again for the next review.